Welcome to Warp Zone, a podcast on sci-fi, philosophy, religion, politics, gaming, and anything else taboo. We are starting a horror special.
Yay!
Yeah.
And to tip it off, we've got Ben, who's very sick.
Yeah.
So he's not putting on a special horror voice. It is his actual sick voice.
Far more nasally than usual, which is very nasal. And in response, Tara is covering herself like, one of those people that go through public transport with masks on all the time.
Yeah, I don't want to get sick, and we're in the red rum room, so it's pretty small. So.
Yeah, so no sharing glasses today.
No.
Yeah. And I'm talking about my reading glasses. Speaking of, I went to the ophthalmologist.
Who you told me?
Ophthalmologist. Yeah, but the listeners don't know.
True.
The listeners need an update that I'm blind.
Blinder than you thought.
Yeah, it turns out I need reading glasses. And the guy's like, yeah, look, it usually happens after 40. And he looks at me and he's like, but you're a little younger, so it happens earlier to some people. They did this cover thing of,
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. You can do that the whole time.
Yes. I'm still covering myself.
Yeah.
Stay back.
It's going to be hard for the microphone. Anyway, so that happened. We're recording this in the past.
Yes.
And we're recording it at the Red Rum Room. I am Ben Banasik.
I'm Tara Smith.
Yes, we are both of the University of Sydney, presently.
That's true.
I can't concentrate. Okay, alright, so what are we talking about?
We're talking about abjection, not objection.
No.
Abjection with an A.
Yeah, not to be confused with
I object.
Yeah, Phoenix Wright, objection. So Julia Kristeva, she's a modern thinker, philosopher. She's French-Bulgarian, so she's French because she speaks French, but she's also Bulgarian because she's not born in France. So depending on which side of the river you are, determines what you view these people as. I will give, I guess, a little bit of a background. So she's a Freudian psychoanalyst. She likes Freud a lot, and she mixes Freudian psychology with Lacan's theory of the self. Basically, what Lacan's theory is, it starts off with the cogito. So Descartes, hanging out, I think, therefore I am. For Lecan, he says, well, that happens because there is a splitting of the self, and it happens during the mirror stage. And it's the first time a human being normally, will go past a mirror, realize that themself is restricted to the body in which they are. Whereas previously they had unique openness, so wholeness almost. And, you're not restricted by this body. But when you look at the mirror, you get shaken, and that splits your personality. And so you have this internal voice then, and then what you view as yourself. So
my cat gets that when he sees himself in the mirror.
Does he?
Yeah, well, cats do it as well, don't they? Like they get freaked out by the mirror, and sometimes you think animals can recognize that it's a reflection. Don't you?
Yeah, I don't think they recognize it's a reflection.
You don't think so?
No. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't done the psychology of a being as in an animal being as much as human beings. So Lacan's theory centers on the small other, which is the constructed self, and the big other, which is the unconstructed, which is the pre-ego id. Okay, so you can see that there's these connections with Freudian theory and then Lacan's theory. Now, Kristeva takes that and says, well, instead of the mirror stage actually happening at a moment and as a developmental moment, there are two aspects to the self, which is the small other and big other, but it's not a shaking experience, which actually happens, as a development. There is just the existence of these two things at all times. And when we are shaken and we realize things, or we are shocked by things, it's almost like an unlocking that we are realizing the constructed self, the small other, is realizing the existence of the big other in ourselves. That's basically where her background is.
Yeah, and we did a reading.
We did a reading, yes. What was the reading?
I can't remember.
I've got it. Approaching Abjection in the Powers of Horror. most of us read page 1, page 1 to 31. Some of us read page 1 to
18.
18, which was the recommended reading anyway. So, yeah.
Yes.
Pass for you.
Yeah.
You got up to the Dostoevsky part.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is fine. You got most of the stuff anyway.
Yes.
What did you think of Kristeva?
I really like the concepts. I think they're really interesting because it fit in nicely with what I'd read on Freud's essay on the uncanny and the horror. That's a theme that we're going to be talking a little bit more about next week. Last week?
Next week.
Next week.
Yeah, next
we're
week
doing
on
more on horror. I think
the
I
monkey
mentioned
paw.
Yes, I think I mentioned Freud a little bit in that, and we talked a bit about the uncanny.
Because this is weird. We're recording this episode in the past for you all, but we're also recording next week's episode in the past for you all, but also in the past for us in the present.
Yes. So anyway, so
Mark, if you're listening to this, can you please draw a map?
Yes, I want a schematic.
Yeah. So this is the present for us, but in the past for you, Mark. And then this will be released in the future, but then the future for you now is going to be also in our past, in our present.
Yes.
Please draw that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So what I'm saying is that I might be repeating myself because I think I talked a little bit about Freud and the uncanny and probably Lanthimos. Yeah. So I think that's good. But can you give just a background? Because I think that in me giving the background of Lecan and then Freud a little bit, and then where Kristeva is, I think it's good to then look at what the uncanny is for Freud. Yes.
And then we can look at the differences between the uncanny and the objection.
Yep. So Freud's theory of the uncanny is based on a concept or almost like a spectrum of Heimlich and Unheimlich, which are two German words where Heimlich means homeliness and Unheimlich means the opposite of homeliness. And he believes that certain things, that they live on this sort of spectrum, and when they vary on the Unheimlich, it's that sort of looking like something that's familiar, but in a way that's horrifying. And the examples he uses are things like losing a tooth as a child, like when a part of your body is removed. So it's sort of, it's common and it makes it, oh no, this is my example actually, sorry. Yeah, this is an example I used in an essay I wrote on this. So I think he looks at losing an eye or having things in your eyes as one of his examples. And I think a tooth is sort of similar because when you lose a tooth, it's a part of your body that should be there that's removed. And as a child, it's quite a horrifying experience. But he also uses examples of the doppelganger. Mm-hmm. So having like a sort of a direct image of yourself that's evil is very, like, is one of these examples. So sort of similar but different. I'm trying to think of other examples, but the idea being that it's something that is familiar but put in a new form which is horrifying and far removed from yourself, but still has that resemblance of something that you once recognized, like a doll. Like a doll that suddenly becomes animated and automate. I think he uses autotrons or automata as an example as well, because you don't expect them to move. They should be dolls, they should be lifelike, but then when they move, it's quite horrifying. But it's also a bit dated, so I'm sure Freud now would have different examples that he might use with technology and things like that.
Yeah.
But yes, this is his sort of theory, and he goes through heaps of examples and sort of a particular story, I can't remember the top of my head, about this doll that becomes automated and it's really spooky and stuff like that. So that's sort of his premise.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder, because I haven't read Freud in depth in that regard, but I wonder if he talks about Ultima beings in Judaism, because he's Jewish, so he might be aware of some of the stories of bringing mudmen from the ground and constructing things and stuff, which is interesting. Anyway, okay, so Kristeva's getting that point, but then she's more interested in the mundane things and how that can shake us, and she uses food as an example. I really love this quote, and I'm going to try and read it if you like.
Yep.
So this is on page 2, and it goes to midway through page 3. I'm going to skip a little section, but I think that this really gets her point. So, loathing an item of food, a piece of filth, waste or dung, the spasms and vomiting protect me. When the eyes see or the lips touch the skin on the surface of the milk, harmless, thin as a sheet of cigarette paper, Pitiful as a nail paring, I experience a gagging sensation, and still further down, spasms in the stomach, the belly, and all the organs shrivel up the body, provoke tears and bile, increase heartbeat, cause forehead and hands to perspire. Along with a sight-clouding dizziness, nausea makes me balk at the milk cream, separates me from the mother and father who proffer it. I, in inverted commas, I want none of that element. Sign of their desire. I do not want to listen. I do not want to assimilate it. I expel it. But since the food is not an other to me, who am only in their desire, I expel myself. I spit myself out. I object myself within the same motion through which I claim to establish myself. During that course which I become, I give birth to myself amid the violence of sobs, of vomit, mute protest of the symptom, shattering violence of the convulsion that, to be sure, is inscribed in the symbiotic system, but in which, without either wanting or being able to become integrated in order to answer to it, it reacts, it abstracts, it objects.
Yes.
She's such a good writer.
She's a good writer.
So good.
It's very
and that's all,
emotive.
Yeah, and that's all about milk, the surface of milk.
Yeah.
And, you know, that layer which is quite, you know, shaking and gross. I was talking about this to my father's girlfriend 2 days ago about things that she's afraid of, and she said something about, what's she afraid of? Oh, my dad, like, snakes, terrified of snakes, absolutely terrified. And I said, oh yeah, I held a snake at the store, you know, someone had a pet snake and brought it in. I thought it was kind of cool, so I held a snake. You know, it's not going to bite me. Saw its little head, it was tiny, a little carpet snake thing. And he was like horrified I did that. But then if you talk to me about, so I don't know if I've shared this, but I'm terrified about cicadas.
Yeah.
Live cicadas, though.
Yeah.
So dead cicadas are fine, or shells of cicadas are okay. Live cicadas, freaked out. But what I find here is interesting is she's talking about something that's mundane. You know, the cream of the milk has no harmful elements to humans at all. It's just, you know, because the milk has not been separated from the other.
My understanding is because it's living on that liminal space between being something nutritious and being something that is, you know, poisonous or could make you sick, and that's the thing. Or well, maybe more like decaying food.
And she has no concept of that. This is her as a child. So this is something that has just shaken.
But when she goes further and explains it, she says that when she's unpacking it, that it's because these things are living in liminal space. It's like a corpse, kind of living, kind of dead.
Yeah.
But at this stage, she might not have realised that.
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. So she's trying to justify it there. But I think that she's talking a little bit about, you know, the difference between sacred and profane, and that space of transition between the two.
Yes.
And that's a dangerous space. But they're regardless, it is a mundane thing, and that feeling she calls abjection. And it's something that shakes her and constantly shocks her. So it's horror not in the element of not being, you know, it's not like scares or, you know, watching Scream movies.
No.
And I know we started with Psycho theme at the beginning of the year because it is a horror theme. But it's being horrified about the mundane. And then that showing that there is this internal self.
Yes.
Almost.
And there's also that element, so it's this, that othering that people are doing as well. It helps create an identity. And she gives the examples of like murderers that, you know, when you find out that they've calculated things to sort of, and, you know, plan premeditated murders and stuff is particularly horrifying because it's like they've planned it. And she says that we distance ourselves from that person. So we say, oh, I'm not like that murderer, you know, and it's a way of also creating a sense of identity. I think that's quite interesting as well. Yeah.
I think it's interesting how she talks, I don't know if it's in this chapter or if it's later, she talks about how society deals with these sort of things. And there's two main ways. It's either art or religion.
Yeah.
So through art, you've got things like Marquis de Sade, or have you read Marquis de Sade at all? The Tales of Sodom? It's a terrible book.
No.
It's really bad. I read it, and I read it on the train, and someone saw the binding of, because I didn't have a cover on it, but you know how it says the name on the spine of the book? And I remember actually covering that because I was so embarrassed if someone knew that I was reading Marquis de Sade, because it's all about sodomy, like this group of guys that are just pushing the extremes of sexual acts with women and men and each other. And,
consensually?
Yeah, but it's pushing it further and further and further. So it's using, excrement, bile.
Right.
Yeah. It gets like extreme. It's really extreme. And
why'd you read that?
I was challenged to read it by a friend of mine, because this guy wrote it in prison about sodomy, and it was he was thrown in jail for his writing. So it's about banned books, and that's something I'm interested in. Banned books and where the extremes of freedom of information is. And I would always say, no, there should be freedom of information. And then I was challenged and given this book, and I said, okay, well, freedom of information, would you think this is okay? And I read it, and I'm like, geez. Anyway, so the other one is Hieronymus Bosch, whose paintings are about hell. And you see them in the art galleries, and you think, oh yeah, it's like a picture, and it's hell. And then you look really close, and you can see like women and men being torn apart whilst they're being raped.
I think I've seen they're really detailed.
Really tiny.
You do chip ditches quite often, like 3.
Yeah. So it's that style. Yeah. But you're looking at it, in a large art gallery, massive big walls and stuff, and then you like look really closely, and they're really small, like painted and stuff, but really detailed. Yeah. Fascinating, and it looks like there's larger images in that as well. Yeah. So small. So art is one way that society may deal with objection, because it actually almost desensitizes, the human condition in dealing with these things, but it can't deal with all things. And then the other way, Kristeva says, is religion, and religion seeks to separate those aspects which may be harmful for humans through horror and objection by removing them in society themselves and outlawing them. So the two ways are not ideal in both regards, but both are human conditions created to actually deal with these horrors and objections.
And it's different for different people, obviously, as well. That's right. It's not like we all will be feeling objection for the same thing. And the same with morality. We won't all think that something's immoral.
No, and that's the problem with religion and art, because they both can't cater towards everything and everyone. And then it becomes the aspect of, well, one society may believe one thing because it's socially acceptable there, and another society may believe something different.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to read, but sometimes a little bit hard to understand because it's just so figurative. So that, sometimes you'd be reading quite a few sentences, and I was not always sure exactly what she was trying to say, but I liked the emotiveness of, like, how much emotion she brings to her writing. I think was really interesting. But and you're going to bring it into, talk a bit about how it relates to Auschwitz. Yeah.
So a few weeks ago, we were speaking about the horrors that were in Auschwitz, and how women were bringing their own sanctity and holiness in that space. For Kristeva, she looks at the fallout of Auschwitz. She's coming from the generation where she's grown up after the Holocaust. She didn't live through that experience, but she certainly would know people that did live through that experience. All of that generation had people that are connected to it in one way or another. So she says, in the dark halls of the museum that is now what remains of Auschwitz, I see a heap of children's shoes or something like that, something I've already seen elsewhere, under a Christmas tree, for instance. Dolls, I believe. The objection of the Nazi crime reaches its apex when death, which in any case kills me, interferes with that. In my living universe, is supposed to save me from death, childhood, science, amongst other things.
And this to me is quite similar to the uncanny, because it's taking something familiar like shoes and the positive things of childhood, and then putting it in a different setting with all the history of, you know, Nazi Germany, and completely changing the meaning and creating this sense of horror, because there's nothing horrifying about the shoes, but in the context of this setting it is.
That's right. That's right. But where the nuance is that Kristeva is doing is she's doing it with the knowledge of Lacan as well, and Lacan with the separation of the self. So the ego and the id, I think she's recognizing, but she's not using those terms in this section that we read anyway. For her, that's not the point. The point is that we are a whole being and a whole human, and we have these different elements inside ourselves, and that shaking from that initial reading is a relation to something that is behind.
I think there's also an aspect of not connecting it with reality. She talks about how, like, the things that we can't understand, that we can't comprehend, and it splits our idea of what is fair or reality or what we expect, and that also creates that feeling.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to it. Like, it's hard to fully condense it into just a few things. But I quite liked what she brings to the thing, and to the conversation on uncanny and abject. And I mean, there's so many films I've seen that I think kind of really walk this fine line between, you know, taking things that familiar, like I showed you a scene in Killing of a Sacred Deer, which is Yorgos's, I think it's his second last film that he just produced, where the main character's eating pasta, and the way he's just putting the fork in, and the sound's really loud. He's like mixing around and eating, and he has pasta all around his mouth, and the way he talks and chews at the same time, and he's talking about some pretty horrific things that happened to him in the past, but with like a sense of ease about it. Like, it's really unnerving, and that whole film, from the beginning to the end, I felt uncomfortable constantly. There was no respite, because sometimes Yorgos will throw in so in The Favourite and in Lobster, there's some comedic elements thrown in. Same with Dog Tooth. It's a little bit funny in a kind of horrifying way, but this film just is so unsettling. So the premise is that a boy's father is killed by a surgeon on the operating table because the surgeon went and did the surgery drunk, and then the boy gets revenge. He has this power where he makes the children slowly lose ability to walk. Blood comes out of their eyes, and they'll die unless the father decides to kill one member of his family. So the whole film, he has to decide who he wants to kill, his son, daughter, or wife, basically. And then the kids start coming up to him and being like, "Please, Papa, you can take me and kill me," but trying to manipulate him to choose who to kill. And it's like horrible. And then they start to lose their limbs, so they'll be walking, they just collapse and they can't move their limbs. And anyway, the film, something about it, I don't know. And I feel like that sense of like losing mobility and somebody having this power over you, where, you know, knowing that you're about to die is very unnerving, and Yorgos manages to just really hit the nail on the head. And the only other director I think that does it as well is Darren Aronofsky. Have you seen Requiem for a Dream?
Yes.
Yeah, all those cut scenes of the taking the drugs and the zooms up, and the, you know, and that final scene is like I know we'll talk about the baby scene in Trainspotting.
Yeah.
But don't you think the final scene in Don't make me describe it. Don't make me describe it.
What happened?
Oh my god.
I can't remember.
Trigger warning. This is really explicit. I think it's the main female character is doing like back-to-back anal in like a fight, like in a pit. She's like having sex backwards. Like, it's like.
Is she?
Yes. I didn't want to have to explain this.
It's been like 4 years since.
But that's the final scene. Like, it's horrible. That's one of the scenes. Like, when you talk about baby scene, that scene's like so disgusting. Like, that's one that stays with me. And I think you haven't seen Mother, have you?
No.
So Darren Aronofsky's film Mother had a lot of critique, but there's like but again, trigger warning, baby shredding scene. Fucking one of the worst things I've ever seen.
Wow. It's
like these films, like, I don't know, like, there's horror, and then there's like that stuff just so bizarre. Like, it totally shatters you. I think babies in harm, babies getting hurt is something.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's a common thing across all people. But what about mundane things? Are you terrified of anything mundane?
Barnacles. Not a big fan.
Really?
Yes. When I was
Really? Barnacles?
Yeah, when I was about 16, I did some work experience with seabird rescue in Ballina, and we had a lot of turtles coming in. Yeah. We had a lot of sea turtles coming in, and they had barnacles, but some of the barnacles drilled so far into their bodies that like they would drill into the shell and they would be in their face, so that once they'd been recovering, they were so covered with barnacles they'd float up to the top and not be able to go down, they'd die basically. So, but once the barnacles, the way that they would like kind of, I could hear them clicking like when they were up on the surface, and then when you'd remove them, you could see that they've spiraled down into the shell, bored in. Something about that just made me feel so queasy. So even though now when I'm seeing barnacles, they just make me feel disgusted, like that. I don't know why. That's one of the things that makes me feel a bit heebie-jeebies. But I was thinking about the food and meat when I smell meat. So meat shouldn't make me feel grossed out because, I mean, it's food. It's like any other food. But something, because I've been vegetarian my whole life and I associate it now with so much negative things, I smell it and I feel repulsed. Like I go, ugh, yuck. You know, but it's not like a biological reason. I should find it fine.
Yeah.
But because I associate it with death and carnage and murder, it smells disgusting to me. Even cooked meat. So I think I can relate on that level too.
It's interesting.
Is there any foods that you smell or taste that you don't like?
Cauliflower.
Yeah, but it's not that kind of abject disgust, is it? Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Gag. Yeah. I cannot stand cauliflower. My mother gave us too much cauliflower as a kid or something. I don't know, but it's horrible. It's a horrible, horrible food.
What about like dead bodies? Like, have you ever seen a dead body?
Yeah.
I've never seen one before.
Really?
No, it's a lie. I've seen them before. In Banasik, I went to the burning, the burner at the river. That was pretty disgusting because all the animals eat the flesh and like hang around. All the dogs and stuff eat the bits of the skin, and you can see the bones like floating in the water. That's pretty disgusting. And like all the smoke, and you're breathing in and knowing that it's human, and everyone's just fine with it.
It smells like pork.
Yeah, that was gross. So, but I didn't feel that. Like I didn't feel removed. Like I didn't feel the sense of objection. I felt.
No.
Yeah.
So that's her point. That there's shocking experiences, but then there's these little things, you know, like the surface of the milk, that really just shakes you, and you want to like gag and throw up, and you're like, you know, trying to get away from that, but you can't because it's just a concept. Really, you're terrified of a concept.
But she talks about corpses, one of her main examples, about that they're living in that space between. So you know that you're not that corpse, but it was once alive and it's dead. So it's living that liminal space as being an example of that. But I didn't really feel that. But I think probably because it was contextual. So I knew I was walking there. I knew what to expect. I knew that they burn bodies in India, and there were people there. It was a morning. It wasn't like it's not like I walked down the street and I saw a body on the road. Do you know what I mean? Like just randomly. That I think would be more shaking. Does that make sense? I think context makes a huge difference.
Or if it was someone you knew that you saw 1 minute in the room and then come back and then they're dead.
I mean, has that happened to you? That someone's been dead. Yeah.
I've seen people I know die.
But did you feel a sense of objection there?
Not really.
No. The other thing is like bodily fluids as well. Like.
Yeah, like what?
Well, that they cause objection, right?
Yeah.
I feel like blood, like menstrual blood, is one of the worst ones. Like people often connect that with it. And I listened to like a little video about it. She was saying how like Trump, when he was critiquing that or getting that journalist out, a female journalist, I can't remember her name. This was a little while ago. He said that she had blood on like her back of her dress. Like, is that trying to conjure a sense of horror so everyone goes, ugh, she had blood on her dress. Yeah. But like, there's nothing. She's just nothing wrong with that. But people use menstruation as and I guess that's going back to the whole idea of purity, impurity. A lot of religions have that in it as well, right? You can't attend certain services if you're bleeding, etc., etc.
He's done that before, Trump, with referring to people having periods.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's very childish.
It's very odd.
Yeah.
Very, very odd. He's an odd guy. Odd dude. I saw it. Side note. I was looking at. I'm part of like an arcade group on Facebook, so I look at people's arcade machines, and you know, it's the swapping thing and stuff. Someone did a MAGA arcade, so make America great again, and it had all Trump all over it. That's such a weird theme to ask someone for, like Trump all over your arcade machine.
That is really weird.
Really bizarre. And of course, it was like really American. It was the biggest screen, the biggest control panels. Everything was massive on the thing.
The biggest control.
Yeah, it's like, it has to be the best. Has to be the biggest. You know, it's like the SUVs. You know, they have to be the biggest. Why? Because I wanted to go down and get the biggest containers of Nutella. And, yeah.
I think also because I showed you this scene, so one of Aronofsky's earliest films, I think he produced it in like 1991, is this film called Pi, which is like a kind of a horror. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've seen Pi.
Oh,
yeah.
Did I tell you to watch it? Or had you already seen it?
No, I saw it before I knew you.
Yeah, but that's a very unnerving film. Like all it's constant scenes of like brains and ants through computers and ants infesting everything. And that scene where I showed you where he's walking up with the brain is sticking pens in it and then feeling the pain in his head.
And
Something
then,
about that.
And there's like being hit by a train, but he's just on the platform, so it's like this smashing sensation of as soon as you like pierce the brain, and it's got like that skin element to it, and it pulsates through, and then that's the smash of the train at that point.
Yeah, I find in general self-harm, like watching actors in films hurt themselves, really hard to watch. Like in Dogtooth, there's a scene where she knocks her tooth out of her mouth with a dumbbell, smiling the whole time, blood pouring out her face, but you see it through the reflection in the mirror. It's just so unnerving, and that force of like just constantly bashing your own face, it just feels like, oh my god.
Yeah.
I don't know why why Lanthimos, like he really likes to play around with these scenes. I don't know whether it's like this Greek diaspora coming through, or like why he feels the need to make it so spooky. I don't know, but I mean, there's plays and things in Greek religion, Greek myth that have been kind of as gory. Like think of how much cannibalism there is in Greek myth, and ripping apart children, like all the Dionysian orgies back and where they would rip open. You know, he'd promote people to rip their children apart and stuff like that. Like,
what's his name? What's his name? Unchained? Something Unchained.
Oh, the Tarantino film. Is it Django?
No.
Django Unchained?
No. That's a thing taken from that. Or maybe it's not taken from that. Should have really prepared that part.
But I mean, Thyestes. So there's Seneca, and I think Aeschylus does a version of Thyestes and Atreus. You know, preparing their children and making them eat them as a theme. It's pretty horrific. Yeah.
I used to not be able to see people piercing needles into their skin.
Oh yeah, it's pretty gross.
That would freak me out. I was not happy. It doesn't matter. I don't know where it is.
I don't know either.
Good talk.
But no, I thought her essay was really useful, especially reading it in conjunction with Freud's The Uncanny.
Yeah.
And because she's such a Freud fan, it makes sense she'd build on that. Do you feel like...
Prometheus.
Yes.
He's chained the entire play.
Yes.
And being like whipped and stuff and tortured, and that's just the play of him hanging out on a chain. This poor actor, and just being smashed constantly and having to act that whole time.
Yeah. I was going to ask you something.
Because he gave humans free will.
Yeah. Oh yeah, mirrors. Do you feel freaked out looking in the mirror, like Lecan, like that kind of weird thing? It's like spooky.
Not really. I think a lot of my view of myself and seeing myself and listening to myself on pods and stuff changed once I was in politics.
In what
I sort
way?
of forced myself to do it, like, because I created my whole campaign. I didn't do it with a campaign team or anything like that. I designed all my flyers, everything. So I was staring at my face for ages, designing the poster and then designing the websites and doing all of that stuff. And
you had to really end up liking yourself more.
I had to sell it, yeah. So I made myself a commodity that way, almost. So then it ceased to be that, not liking to look in the mirror or whatever. But I can understand that feeling.
I feel uncomfortable. I don't like to look in the mirror often. Like I don't have a mirror in my bedroom. I have one mirror in the bathroom. I used to brush my teeth, but I don't look in the mirror before I go out.
Is red rum still written on it?
No, I got rid of that.
Tara, context. Tara had a get together for Halloween, and there was a red rum drawn on the mirror, which is quite funny. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I find mirrors and reflections and stuff. Not my favourite thing to look at. But not because I find it spooky, but just because I don't like looking at myself very much, just in general. Tom doesn't look in the mirror either. Like, people, in movies, people just spend a lot of time looking in the mirror, like psyching themselves up or like practicing speeches.
I don't think anyone does that.
Does anyone do that?
No, I don't think anyone does that.
Outside of films.
I think they just get ready and then that's it. Like, you're spending as little time as possible in the bathroom and then just going to get shit done.
Yeah.
Like, no one does that.
I think women often spend quite a bit of time in front of the mirror, I've heard.
Yeah?
Putting makeup on and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Does Jodie spend much time in front of the mirror?
Well, sometimes in the mornings it feels like a long time if you have to go to the bathroom. But in reality, it's probably not.
Yeah.
Have
we got anything else to say?
Don't think so. I don't know.
That might be a short one.
You always say that.
It's like an hour later.
Anyway, so I think it's a unique way of looking at the difference between the internal self and the external self, and particularly focusing on that aspect of horror and shaking.
I don't think I fully understand it. I think I understand aspects of it. I mean, like, I'm trying to think what aspect I don't understand. Well, exactly how it's different to Freud's theory of the uncanny.
Well, Freud doesn't see that and connect it to internal, external, other, or ego, id. For him, it'd all be in the id.
Yeah. So it's more to do with the splitting of... What does that mean? Like,
so Lacan, mirror, you don't understand the mirror theory, so that's the shaking experience. That Lacan does not agree with Freud in that regard.
Yeah.
So Kristeva's taking Lacan, going, okay, yeah, that could be possible, but it's not that moment exactly.
Throughout your life.
It's throughout, right? Yeah. And the way that she talks about it as poetry. So she's a literary theorist as well. So poetry... It happens with a rhyme, yeah? So especially children's poems. And that's talking about something that is internal to you and is part of the big other, or the big self. So it touches on the big self because it's beyond meanings. Meanings are all surface level stuff. Words are surface level. So where you've got a poem and actually puts surface level and attaches it to some sort of music or rhythm that is part of the big other. So it connects the two of them together.
But that seems to me have nothing to do with the feeling of rejection, of expelling yourself out and this horrible
That's a breaking
feeling.
of. So the objection is a breaking of your small self realizing the existence of the big self almost, and it's just like a shit. I'm
so
here.
what's the difference between your small self and your big self? Exactly.
What do you mean?
Well, so small self is your id and the other's your ego?
Yeah.
I'm not really familiar with these terms anyway.
Yeah, so your small self, so Lacan, constructed self, is the small other. The big other or big self, is the pre-ego id.
What does pre-ego id mean?
Before you have the mirror stage, when you're thinking, everything's all,
Right,
I'm all in the world, I'm a toddler,
do whatever.
Person, whatever. And then you look in the mirror and you're, okay, now I realise who I am, and there's a breaking of the self.
Yeah.
So you still have the existence of the big other and then a small other. So Kristeva says, no, it doesn't have to happen at that shaking moment. It's just a constant thing of these two living side by side, or two existing side by side all the time, or behind each other. It doesn't matter.
So once, before you have the mirror stage, it's like a formless kind of like, you don't really have a sense of self, right? And then when you develop that, the bigger self, and then it's the coming of the two together. So
Lacan says that it's all constructed after that, yeah? Kristeva's different.
She says it's constructing throughout.
Yeah.
But so it's the split of that construction.
So the split, so that is the objection. So the objection is the realisation.
I don't think I fully understand it. I think I'm not very familiar with these psychoanalytic terms. Anyway, I've read Freud's essay on the uncanny. I haven't read any of his other stuff.
Okay.
So I don't really understand like all
ego,
the ego, exactly.
Yeah, right, okay. Super ego.
No. I mean, I've heard the terms, and I understand ego in like a normal sense that everybody understands it as, but Freud's sense not as much.
It's all about wanting to have sex with your mother.
Yeah.
That's
the other part. When she brings in, she thinks it could come from a lack of motherly love, right? She talks a bit about maternal love.
That's right. And that's the difference between her and Freud massively. So she says that not everyone wants to bang your mother. We don't all want to sleep with our mother. there is a desire for love from the mother as well, which is different.
But and she talks about that we construct that, and that creates a rift as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is this difference that way. And she's trying to wrestle femininity and feminism from being anti-children as well. For her, like, women should have the choice.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with wanting children and being a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually a powerful thing as well. And then that powerful thing relates you to the children, and those children are actually empowered in that way. They are not constantly in anxiety because of that experience, which is what Freud does quite often. He's reading into... he argues at one point that all... he later changes it, but all psychoses are due to the Oedipus complex. Everything.
Yeah.
Everything is in relation to, the father or the mother, which is just not true. And it took someone in his own family to develop psychoses for him to say, oh, well, no, that can't be the case. She was not raped by her father. I know that, definitely.
Right.
And then he changes his mind.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I know Freud's got some issues.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he has some issues. So I unapologetically sit on the Jungian side, not the Freudian side. But I think what Freud did in arguing, the difference between ego and id was seminal for Jung's theories, and is useful that way. And it leads to thinkers uniquely engaging with phenomenology, like Kristeva, and how she does it. And I think that that's the innovation, which is useful and it's good.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I like the essay on uncanny, but anytime it gets too far into like mom and dad stuff, loses me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
that will be it.
Id.
Id will id you adieu.
Bye. Oh yeah, we're gonna leave with one of my favorite scenes from Lobster, a hunting scene where it's in slow motion, people are running, and the whole score in Lobster, the film score in all of Lanthimos's films are amazing. So enjoy
the theme tune. See you. Bye.
Τον καιρό που μ' αγαπούσες με ρωτάς ένα πρωί στην κουβέντα μας απάνω τι είναι άραγη ζωή. Τότε γύρισα και σου είπα για άλλους είναι το κρασί, για άλλους δόξα, για άλλους πλούτη, μα για μένα είσαι εσύ. Για άλλους δόξα, για άλλους πλούτη, μα για μένα είσαι εσύ. Τώρα που άλλαξε η καρδιά σου και έναν άλλο αγαπά, απορείς μου λένε ακόμα η δική μου πως χτυπά. Μήπως τα χάσαν και εμένα δεν είναι άνθρωποι πολλοί, από μέσα πεθαμένοι και απόξω ζωντανοί, από μέσα πεθαίνω